5:30 p.m. on Monday, September 9th, 2024. So the agenda that we have for today is the call to order. We'll do a roll call. We'll ask if there's guests or presenters. We'll review the Parks Board minutes from August 14th. We will hear from Eric Schreiner about the Parks and Forestry Director's report, including the damaged Sandy Beach pier update, which wasn't part of the August 14th. Public comments, including emails. Create a notice to ask for a public comment regarding recommendations on next steps fulfilling the City Council Resolution 23-A. Partly is review, discuss, and update the Mill Pond recommendations for fishing piers, boardwalks, motorless watercraft launch, and such. Then we'll also look at and consider the versions for the pier concepts that were provided by Eric. The next part of the agenda is discussion recommendations for the acceptance of Bartles Beach bike rack donation and recommendations for future agendas. So, given the agenda, call to order. Okay, would you start, please?
Craig Baker, present.
Mike Niesman, present. Sorry. Mike Niesman, present.
Anita Martin, present.
Tim Sprecher, present.
Mary Schmager, present.
All right, thank you. Guests and presenters. Colton, you are here, as my understanding, to answer questions, but there's not a presentation that you have scheduled. All right, thank you very much. So Parks Board minutes, review and approval of the minutes from August 14th. So those were submitted by Mike and forwarded by Madison. So why don't you take a look and then we'll see if there's any corrections or updates to the minutes.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, Mike.
I have a suggestion regarding the recognition of, oops, sorry, that's my, I have it off, but I don't know how that happens. So a question regarding the noting of our specialists that joined our meeting, Colton, Arthur, and Aaron, and whether they should be better noted as a part of the business item discussion rather than public comment. Because they were guests that we had invited to join in helping us to learn more about the study that Colton had completed with his 103 data point survey, et cetera. And I'm wondering if that would be better noted as a part of the business item rather than as a public comment. That was my only suggestion for improvement.
Any comments to Mary's suggestion?
You mean like put under business items, under discussion, recommendation, next steps, and then just cut and paste those? And the discussion was informed and joined by.
Yes.
Boom. Okay.
Yes, that would be my recommendation.
And just for the clarity, I think that's an excellent point by Mary, is that who they are and what they represented.
Yeah,
You know,
that was awesome.
Yeah, what function they have and such.
I think it says that here. So Aaron Cox, Water Resources Zoning Specialist, Arthur Watkinson. You don't want to go further than that, do you?
No,
No, but just sort of like, just make sure they're,
It'd just be a cut and paste and put
Yeah.
it down
because I
below.
think public comment, at least the way I understand the notes from the way the city council works as a public comment is if you come in, sign in, and you are bringing forward a topic of concern or issue, they were actually invited as a part of the conversation. So I would just note them that they were present and contributed as a part of the business item versus it being a public comment.
Do we need a motion to accept that amending of the minutes, I think?
I believe so, yes. So do you want to put
So
that?
I would like to move that we accept the meeting minutes with the modification to include the section that's noted as public comment, starting with Colton Hutchinson and ending with Arthur Watkinson, Water Resource Specialist, Wisconsin DNR, moving that down to the business item under our discussion comment, that they were in attendance and contributed, and then I would propose that we accept the minutes otherwise as stated.
I have a comment in that I would like to accept the motion that Mary has added. I was just also just part of discussion on the public comments and emails. I was wondering if we should have a bit more detail as to what the emails were regarding for the minutes. If we had any, because right now I can't remember what public comments or emails that we discussed at the last meeting.
Then you start a little mission creep a bit. So do you want to then get into more detail on what we discussed? I'm happy to do it, but I'm trying to follow the recommendations, and that was to keep it brief, and everybody says, well, they can just go on the video and see it, but whatever you guys want.
Well, that's sort of like, right now, if I want to see what the comment was before I would want to go to the video. So because right now it just says that we had them, yes, but I just put it up there to say, would it help, or would it be mission creep, sort of, as you're saying, Mike?
Could we just put who the email was from?
Or the topic. City council just puts the topic.
Yeah, topic and leave the name separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I would have just a topic, whether it be, the beach or the commons or anything, just so we had some sort of frame of reference.
So something like emails were received, not enumerating from whom, regarding beach issues and the Sandy Bay restaurant.
Yeah.
Is that
Perfect.
okay?
I think that'd be ideal. Thank you, Mike.
But I don't remember what emails we got for the last one, so it'll have to be the next minutes.
I think that last time, did we not also get one regarding the mill pond?
No one, actually, we did not have a public comment at the last meeting. No one joined our last meeting.
I think there's an email from a resident who lived on the mill pond, but otherwise, I can't remember. There's a couple other ones we discussed, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
I know there was one, at least, from a resident on Mill Pond, because I received that one, so.
Yeah, but that goes to my point. So if we can just add the topic and then what it was about, so then someone wants to go back in the minutes, at least there's that memory.
Well, I can go back to that video and just, find out what they said, and just say, as I said, video or emails received regarding blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So do we need a motion to?
We have a motion.
I'm sorry.
A second.
Yes, so let's go with Mary's motion, please. Anita?
And I would second that motion.
All right, thank you. Vote, McCray?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Motion passes. And then do we need a motion regarding adding just a little bit of detail regarding the public comments and emails edit? If so, I would say just add,
A second motion, okay.
just add that what the topic was about.
And I'll second your motion to add the material to that section.
All right, so Mary, would you affirm?
So I second the motion that we are going to add the topic of public comments or emails in that section of the minutes.
Okay, thank you. McCray?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, and thank you for the minutes, Mike.
Which is interesting, you know where minutes come from? Why we call them minutes? It came from minuta something, because initially in the Middle Ages, they were doing all this flowing script, and they realized it was getting too busy, so they were minute, not minutes, but minute script to make it smaller. Isn't that, I never thought of
Thank
that.
you for that knowledge.
That's today's point of language.
Do we need to put that on public comment, or?
I'm not the public, I'm on the board, too.
I expect one fact each time, Mike, from you, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Again, it's always good to learn something.
If only I remembered.
So thank you. Moving to the item number 5 in the agenda, Parks and Forestry Director's Report from Eric. Please, Eric.
Perfect. There's a couple things I would like to go over. First, initially, I will make a separate point to discuss specifically the Sandy Beach piers. I will say after Labor Day, or actually prior to Labor Day, we have the end of our seasonal staff. At least 50% of our workforce, if not more, is seasonal laborers that help throughout the season. Normally, most of them are college-age students who are going back to school. So September, if it is a warm September, is still a struggle to keep all of our staff updating and maintaining all the parks and everything without that seasonal workforce. Right now, we're lucky that it's very dry and we actually have a bit of a lapse, so we're not doing as much mowing as we are right now. But normally September is fairly difficult until we get into the fall season, specifically for parks maintenance. So we are sad to see them go, but we had a fantastic crew this season, and I would very much like to see some of those young adults back next year. They did a fantastic job this summer. For forestry, we are specifically trying to complete a removal list early this season. We do have anticipated staff vacancies this year due to some medical reasons where we won't have our arbor staff fully staffed this season. So we're trying to get that removal list done early in the season. So that is also kind of cutting into our parks work currently, but we're on track to get that all completed ahead of time. And we are taking, all forestry staff are taking substantially more continuing education seminars and training opportunities, some of which are local right now in collaboration with Cambridge Tree Project, which is nice. The next thing I will say is actually this morning we had an incident at Rotary Park. We did have a circumstance of arson at Rotary Park restrooms. So we do have a portion, they are still open to the public. My first concern was potential carcinogens due to smoke damage. Right now we have done what we can today to abate that as much as possible. And this will be throughout the week, we'll be addressing that. It wasn't substantial damage, so it was much better than it could have been, but we are addressing the fire that occurred in Rotary Park restroom shelter this morning. So I'm not sure if anybody had heard anything, but we're doing what we can to address and abate it.
And Eric, you're pretty confident that was arson and not some mistake?
It is very hard to tell whether it was vandalism or arson or a legitimate accident, but it did occur this morning. A garbage can and a couple other things were burned within the restroom itself. We were very lucky to not have substantial amounts of damage within it. If it would have been any more extent to damage, I would have closed the restrooms due to fear of potential smoke damage or breathing in. So we're doing what we can to address it right now. Unfortunately, this is not the first case this has happened. There have been cases of arson at Commons Park and other restrooms as well. But like I said, that's an actually update as of today. Normally vandalism cases stop pretty drastically after the start of school. Unfortunately, this year we have had several circumstances of vandalism, specifically within the cemetery as well. So like I said, doing what we can to address it. The next thing I will do is I will touch base and give an update on the Sandy Beach boat launch piers. Actually, this is an update as of today as well. I list two different circumstances of damages that were on these piers, one being July 7th and one being July 10th. The one on July 10th, we have since received insurance claim coverage for that section. That was in the amount of $8,500 specifically for those two sections that were damaged in that one incident. What I'm going to be doing with that is dependent on city council approval of the general operating budget or capital improvement budget. I do have new floating piers, which are hopefully going to be much more sustainable within that. So pending approval of that budget, that $8,500 from that insurance claim will ideally go to the purchase of new piers. If that budget is not approved, that $8,500 will go into repair and replacement of our existing ones. $8,500. So I'll go into a little bit regarding the actual boat launch damages. These piers were installed, both of them in 2021, basically completing the phase 1 project of Sandy Beach development. These piers are 60 feet sections. Every circumstance, or at least every season, there has been some form of total damage on each section. Each pier consists of 6 10-foot sections. So at least every season there has been one section completely damaged, some of which totaling beyond our $10,000 deductible on insurance claims. Sourcing the parts is very difficult, but we have been able to do what we can to get them replaced. It's normally a full season turnaround for some of these pieces to be replaced. When wheel supports or axles are broken, those can be replaced. However, when there is structural or frame damage, I don't necessarily feel comfortable having those sections repaired. I would much rather have them be replaced, and that's where some of the difficulty comes in sourcing them. So currently, right now, we have 5 pier sections in place, and that is just enough to constitute the use of 1 pier. So to put it in perspective, we should have 12 total sections of pier. Right now, we have 5. Those have been structural damages on these piers over multiple different circumstances of damage. We only have 2 confirmed cases to where vehicles have collided with trailers. The rest of them seem to be watercraft, but the majority of the time we find these after weekend usage or upon inspection of the piers after a weekend or at each day that we're performing maintenance. And even since July 10th, with just these 5 sections being in, we have 2 additional circumstances of damage on these piers, one of which being the damage of our handicap accessible grab rail for the pier itself, and then another wheel section that is damaged, and including our bollard as well that is damaged. Those bollards.
What was that thing?
Bollard. Those bollards are the yellow stanchions in front of the piers themselves. Those were installed the first summer they were installed because we already had damage on these piers the first month they were installed. The bollards, in theory, stop vehicle or trailer traffic before they collide with the pier. But it has been substantial each season that we've had structural damage to them over several different circumstances. So that's what prompted the research into more sustainable piers to be replaced. But like I said, if we do not have budget approval, my goal still is to have 2 launch piers accessible there. I've received several negative claims or comments. The boat launch is substantially backed up during busy holiday weekends or just general weekend use itself when there is just 1 pier there. It was designed to be a 2-lane pier, 2 boat launch pier. And having 50% launching capacity definitely decreases visitor usability of the site. So I do want to maintain 2 piers at that location. But like I said, it's very hard to predict the damages and address it when they come in. I would hate to have a structurally compromised pier and someone's walking on them and potentially be injured. So like I said, doing what we can to remedy it as much as possible. I think the biggest issues with these piers are the fact that they're rolling and not floating. So each of these 12 sections has a section of wheels and supports. Each of those sections has 2. So when you figure there are 24 wheels and support sections, those are 24 upright sections that can be contacted by most often trailer tires is what the issue is. And unfortunately, it happens very commonly. I would like to prevent it as much as possible, but unfortunately, I cannot teach people how to back in watercraft, and that's normally what the case is when people are launching and retrieving watercraft. But that is the update on the piers. Due to the timing of replacement of those sections and the potential for replacement next year, I just could not justify spending the amount of money to replace those sections. If I were to purchase them in July post this damage event, I wouldn't receive them until the end of September anyways, and it comes to the point, if we pull them mid-October, remove them mid-October, it was a difficult price to pay for it. And I do understand the inconvenience of having just 1 pier over 2, but hopefully we can do what we can to address in the future. Yes.
Could I ask a question? Did you say that the damage tends to be $10,000 an incident? I was having a little trouble with my hearing.
Yeah, similar. So that's our deductible amount is $10,000. To put it in perspective, two sections were damaged in that July 10th incident, and that totaled $8,500. There are sections that have been damaged worse than others, or the further out a section is, the longer the legs will be. Therefore, that section costs more than others. There's just more material to it. So if one section is damaged, it is about $5,000.
And I'm speculating, if you have a middle section get damaged and you have to remove it, it's not always easy to
You're correct,
back them
yep.
all back because all the legs are the wrong, or
Yep.
whatever, isn't that right? You run into some issues. It's probably why you only have 5 out there now instead of 12.
Yep, you're exactly right. So we do have 1 additional undamaged section right now. Unfortunately, it is a shore section. So there's not much we can do to extend the length of the pier. Ideally this year, which was great, we had high water levels. I think if we had lower water levels in the past, all 6 of those sections would be necessary to launch a boat to get into deeper water. So the 5 sections are working well for now, but like I said, it's only 1 pier, not 2. We're at 50% launch capacity. I've not necessarily seen a decrease in boat launch usage. It just comes down to user experience as well and ease of launching. I would like to make it as easy as possible. And especially if we have a boat ramp that was designed for the use of 2 lanes, I would like to make sure that we can use both lanes.
There are a couple things. First, I see this, that you're considering a closed video system, which is probably a good idea, right? Second, is there any sense of how our damage rate compares with similar municipalities? And third, given how this is so common, how much it's costing us, is there any thought about increasing the boat launching fees? Because why should the taxpayers foot this bill?
Good questions. I can actually answer all those. Right now, we're at the capacity for state regular, and maybe Colton can correct me as well too. But there is a threshold that the state requires you not to exceed for launching fees, and we are at that capacity right now. We do match the township fees as well. That was the intent with raising our boat launch fees. The next question is closed camera system. Yes, we are looking at, or actually there will be a project currently for cameras to be installed at city facilities. Cameras would be installed following Sandy Beach redevelopment, so it would be a portion of this as well.
I'm not,
Sandy Beach redevelopment, so when like restaurant stages progress, when the actual parking lot progresses, there would be camera installation as well. The biggest things, we don't have fiber accessibility right down there right now, but with the installation of a restaurant or additional like park renovation features down there, there would be fiber installed. And I would plan to have cameras at least at the boat launch and any parking utilities.
just wondering, is there any thought of pursuing this, increasing the rates? I mean, this has to be happening everywhere, and I would think, I mean,
Not
or
necessarily.
surcharge or something for
Not
this?
necessarily. It comes down to pier design. When I was with the DNR, I managed, it was close to 70 different boat access sites. These piers, they're not bad piers. They're just not piers designed for this frequency of launching or this high use of a boat launch. It does come down to the construction of them. When we look at the ones on the north end, those are floating piers that have a galvanized frame. The actual float tubs are wrapped underneath the galvanized frame, and that sees substantial amounts of usage as well. And the amount of damages on those piers does not compare even close to the ones that we have. It does come down to the actual design of the pier itself. When I did manage the boat sites with the DNR, we came up with designs that we preferred that would be as maintenance-free as possible and damage-free as possible. We know people are going to collide with these. We know there's going to be high volume of traffic. We know there's going to be people who are inexperienced and backing in. What can we do to alleviate the potential for damage? Really comes down to the design of the piers. So I feel very confident in the design of the piers that's proposed within the CIP to hopefully be as sustainable as possible. The nickname was tank-proof piers. They seem to do pretty well.
I'm really having trouble
Oh, I'm sorry.
following. I don't know what,
The nickname for these piers, at least similar to this design, was tank-proof. So hopefully they do very well. I'm very confident that the design of new proposed piers would be great. Like I said, it's not the piers themselves. They're just not the right ones for the spot.
Eric, I just have a question because you answered it to a degree with the county's north side pier. Doesn't seem to get damaged like the ones that are in the Sandy Beach. With the amount of money that is being incurred for repair, would it be in the interest of the city to maybe just short-term have a launch attendant during the busy times? Not to back anybody's boat in, but if something happens, there's somebody that do an incident report?
That would fall down to the CSOs, the community service officers that are down there. That would be kind of within their scope and discretion of their job description. So the CSOs, the community service officers who are down at Sandy, they are at the boat launch writing citations and monitoring it as well. It comes down to, we can't be everywhere all at once kind of thing too, and a lot of times this happens unexpectedly. So if we do have an attendant or a CSO there till 6 p.m., we don't find the damage till 6 a.m. the next morning. It could happen in those periods to where we don't have a staff member down there. But we have had, for example, the one on July 10th, we were able to contact the person who it happened to, which was nice. So if we didn't have an attendant down there, we wouldn't have known about that circumstance. So that's a big one I did not touch on at the last meeting, and I apologize. I will go quickly through a couple other notable ones, and then I will be open to any questions. Let me see here. We do also have erosion control issues at the Sandy Beach Boat Launch. We've intentionally not addressed them due to just the amount of traffic down there. We have to do it kind of in the off season. What's happening right now is the actual interfaces for these piers are getting washed out by wave action, water action, all this kind of stuff. So the actual material that's underneath the concrete slabs has since washed away. I did contact Aaron Cox. We would be exempt from additional permitting for this project. This would be a restoration project. I'm anticipating to do that project immediately after we remove the piers, which is approximately mid-October to the second week of October. I just want to make sure that those are as stable as possible and repaired prior to ice on, just so there's not damage from ice shoves. But that will be an upcoming project in October. Water quality testing for the beaches has stopped. That is normally from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we will no longer be collecting the water quality samples at the beaches. I've done what I can to notify residents as well, and we have removed the actual water quality signage, but still have the information regarding the signage that does list that beaches are tested Memorial Day through Labor Day. We have had several sewer blockages at the Sandy Beach Mobile Home Park, more so than the last few years. And we will be finishing up the Tyranina Park parking lot project with the striping of those parking lots and delineating of parking stalls. And then the last thing is I have made the decision to limit private boat lift storage at Sandy Beach to a maximum of 10 lifts. I can go into a little bit more about this. In the past, prior to 2021, approximately 6 lifts, private boat lifts were stored at Sandy Beach. There was a fee and a lease associated for that storage of those private boat lifts. Otherwise, it was just the city-owned boat lifts that were stored at Sandy Beach. Through 2021 and 2022, or at least the drought years, 22 and 23, I'm sorry, there was a substantial amount of unregistered boat lifts that were private residences that were delivered to Sandy Beach. There were 36 private boat lifts at Sandy Beach this last season. We have 28 that we store. This rendered the beach nearly inaccessible for my staff to perform maintenance as well as install the boat lifts and piers timely and accordingly. We do have a requirement that we need to have them installed and functional by April 15th. However, if we have times to where there's fair weather at the end of March, we will install them early. Having that amount of unregistered boat lifts caused a massive enforcement issue for several staff, both myself included, that these were privately stored, non-allowed lifts here. For one, there does need to be a fee associated for that storage. There does need to be a lease. Otherwise, it is basically abandonment of personal property on public property. But when it caused substantial amounts of staff impact for our maintenance practices and beach setup practices, I determined that 10 was about as comfortable as I could store, or maximum that I could store at Sandy Beach. Don't think it will be as much of an issue this year because of the higher water levels. The lower water levels did cause issues for people to get their boat lifts on their own private shore. I understand the difficulty, but at the same time, I also need to be cognizant of what it is that we need to perform maintenance practices in our general operations at the beach. So I have reached that 10 boat lift storage capacity at Sandy Beach in the past couple weeks.
What kind of revenue deficit are you going to start experiencing by that reduction in lifts? And can you speak more to the city? You said the city actually has lifts, and what are they, other than the police boat? Why would the city have additional lifts, and how many of those, and what kind of revenue do we get from that?
So storage of private boat lifts, this was one thing that we actually brought up at previous Parks Board meeting as well. We did increase the price to this because I know I brought it up last year. How can we alleviate this issue? And the first thought was enforcement and raising the price for it. So that was raised. I forget what the previous one is, but I believe it's $125 for city residents, and I think it's $175 for non-city residents. But I would look it back, but it was a 2023 Parks Board decision when we reviewed the costs on those. In fact, we actually have more registered boat lifts, the 10 this year, than we had in the past. I think we had 6 registered boat lifts in the past. It was the unregistered ones that caused the problem. So the people.
I'm sure we were unregistered, but the boat lift companies all communicated to, because I'm, one of many
Yeah.
neighbors, that it was that they had given us the impression that they had gotten permission from the city to move everybody's down there, just as you know, and I'm sure you've had conversations with
Yep.
others, so.
So where I started this process initially, I understand the issues with these contractors as well. They pull the majority of these private boat lists and store them on the beach. My conversation first started not with the residents, but with the contractors. Saying I do need to have prior lease approval before any additional private leases are stored on Sandy Beach. So I started with the majority of the general contractors on the beach. If there are any that are delivered to the beach without having an active lease, we are going to consider it refuse property or incorrectly stored property, and at which point I believe the police department will take seizure of it, and we will do what we need to do as far as enforcement. So I know this was something that we brought up at the end of the season last year as well, that it caused some pretty substantial operational issues down at Sandy Beach, but it wasn't an issue we experienced in the past because we didn't have that majority of boat lifts being stored at the beach. It just wasn't an occurrence in the past.
Could I ask, oh, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I just wonder, are you going to communicate this with the major boat lift companies and maybe put something in the paper?
We did, I did for the boat lift contractors. I started with them. That was the beginning of my conversation.
And then how will residents know about this? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, actually, good question. So what I would like to do first is I don't think it was necessarily well known that there was the opportunity for private boat lift storage until it became an emergency situation during the drought years. This was more of a pilot program or trial program to see if 10 is the maximum capacity that I'm allowed to take down there. I haven't seen those 10 lifts down there, and I am taking them on a case-by-case basis right now. So I do have a few remaining additional leases in limbo right now to see if we have additional space for them. And like I said, reviewing them on a case-by-case basis. But what I would like to do is it ultimately comes down to communication. How this works for this year, I would like to see. Hopefully, we address the issue for the general parks operations, and then I would like to make it well known to lake residents that this does require a fee, and we do have finite space for private boat lift storage. Now, when it comes down to how is that going to be decided, it was a first come, first served basis at this year. Is that necessarily the best route to go? I'm not quite sure. So I suppose best practices to follow after this season would kind of be my thought. This is new uncharted territory for me.
So thank you for that update. Oh, I'm sorry. Just for clarity, when you talked about Aaron Cox, Aaron is the water specialist
Yes,
in the
sorry.
DNR. So just make sure that when people hear the name, they
Yep.
know who Aaron is. And the other thing, I just wonder, your comment about Tyrena Park parking lot, I think it might be helpful for us if we just say that's the upper
Tyrena, yep.
Park. Is there any plans for lower Tyrena Park?
We've talked about that, delineating parking stalls down there. I think it would be difficult due to how narrow it is, and the majority of people do park on the recycled asphalt edge as well. If we were to fully stripe that and delineate the parking stalls, I think it would impede traffic flow at Lower Tyrena too much. We will be doing directional, basically traffic arrows though, to hopefully have a same consistent path of traffic, I think will help. But I think it would be difficult to delineate stalls at Lower Tyrena.
And I'm not proposing, I just wondered
Yeah.
if there's been places where they park, like you say, along the side, along the lake. I think that's preferred. But then they go all the way around the circle, and some pull over to the parking, the picnic area. So if we can delineate that, or even say, no parking or temporary parking or something like that.
Yeah. And that was a thought too. I do think painting lines along that area, it is fairly narrow there. It's mostly a path of access for vehicles around there.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of it also comes down to the orientation of the first vehicle that parks, therefore designates how the remainder of people park at Lower Tyrena. So I think having the directional arrows will help a little bit. Same thing with Upper Tyrena. We will be doing directional arrows for that actual loop that comes around, as well as the entry and exit to the park. And we will have designated handicap parking at Upper Tyrena as well. We are maximizing parking availability as much as possible. So we'll actually have a few parallel parking, not parallel, but lengthways parking stalls, I guess, as well as nose-in parking. So we did measuring of what our required space or distance are for these parking stalls, and this is as many parking stalls as we can realistically put into Upper Tyrrellena.
Thank you. I do have a photo of a handicap parking at, I think it's called Marion Park in Mazamani, where you can actually pull the vehicles straight forward and then so your wheelchair or such is access there. So that might be something we could consider, because I know we've talked about improving the fishing access down at Lower Tyrrellena for handicap.
Yeah, so we will have, this is going to be normal ADA requirement parking stall, at least at Upper as well, hash marks for van accessible and wheelchair accessible and everything else as well. But those are the two largest updates, would be the Sandy Beach piers and then the private boat lift storage right now.
As to the boat lift storage, I don't remember what my parents paid for moving their boat lift from, the lake to wherever they stored it, but they stored it, up on a hill in like a city area. But I was wondering would there be a place for boat lifts over at one of our other parks, like where right now we have the mulch field over there by industrial land? Would that be something that we could make sure that people are aware of that, they know the cost of moving it there?
So I was thinking about this as well. It does come down to staff capabilities as well. I don't necessarily want to have my staff in the business of moving private boat lifts. However, it could be an opportunity for those private contractors, those barge operators, to deliver them somewhere. The other one was in the parking lot at Sandy Beach. The entirety of the parking lot is not used year-round, but when we're in the circumstances of limbo right now regarding construction of Sandy Beach Park, I don't necessarily want to have substantial amounts of private boat lifts that we may have to move or remove at that location. But I think it does depend on the initial design or the next step of design of the parking lot. I think there are increased opportunities for private boat lift storage. Right now, it's just not really conducive to it when they're on the beach in that quantity of numbers.
I guess you'd have to talk to Dan about any liability issues too then, right? If you guys are moving private property,
That's the other circumstance. I want to make sure that, especially in this period, when we switch to fall period, I want to have as much emphasis on urban forestry operations, because we also have a very limited window for our staff to perform forestry operations. Any additional work that we do as far as taking on boat lift moving or additional storage, that labor time has to come from other priorities within the department. So it's kind of a difficult thing. So like I said, this year is definitely going to be in limbo, but this absolutely is in response to the substantial impact that the amount of unregistered boat lifts being stored at Sandy Beach caused for spring startup for parks operations.
Could I ask a question? You mentioned that several sewer blockages have been occurring at the mobile home park more than usual. Is that just basically because of the heavy rain, or what's going on with that?
Infrastructure. It's the sewer infrastructure down there is difficult to maintain at best. They were built at different periods, and Bill, our wastewater treatment foreman, going to be much more receptive to speak to this. He's much more an expert than I am. It is a regular occurrence at the mobile home park just due to the design of the actual sewer system down there. We're just experiencing more and more blockages. It could be tree roots growing into terracotta sewer systems or anything else like that as well. And it's just happening very frequently. We get several a year. We just happen to have several that came right before Labor Day all in a row. So unfortunately, it's dealing with the sewer infrastructure at that location.
Thank you.
and then, so Eric, and then the city's on the hook for repairing that. So if they
We are,
call you
yes.
on a weekend,
We are, yes.
okay.
So if I may add regarding that subject, the city council at the recent planning meeting did identify that as a continued risk, the Sandy Beach mobile home communities infrastructure back in 2000 and I guess it would have been 16, 17 when they had the consulting firm originally start looking at that Sandy Beach game plan on what it could be moving forward, had that as an imperative that that infrastructure get replaced, and now we're in 2024. So we have that as a sense of urgency and have more work to do to figure out how we get after it in a timely fashion to help the city team who is having to respond to all of this. And then the costs, it is just a really messy situation, though, that we recognize has to get addressed. And so that was one of our recent conversations at the planning meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary. Sorry for the long-winded report. It's just been a substantially busy August. But I appreciate it. We have survived Labor Day, and it was actually a fairly quiet holiday for us, which was nice.
Can I ask one?
Yes.
I do have a question. I did receive several emails regarding the Rock Lake water level drawdown and recognition that the date that it was intended to start flowing was the 7th, but observations suggested that today was the day it actually started to draw down, that on the 7th and the 8th, this weekend, it didn't really have a material draw, and I was curious if that was because you switched it to manual today, or if it was supposed to be automatic and knowing it's the weekend, or if it was supposed to be automatically done on the 7th and we had an issue, because I know we reprogrammed it. So that was a question that came forward.
Good question. So it did start on the 7th. So when it's changed to automatic, that's actually when we flip it over. So it did come in and actually flip it to fall setting from the summer setting, which changes the set point of the dam. It goes through the, basically our operating systems to re-regulate throughout that. And today we're seeing a much larger discharge. And what I will be doing is monitoring it just to make sure and estimate how long it's going to take to hit that September 15th level. I would not like it to hit that level before September 15th. I want to maximize the amount of potential opportunity for people to remove those boat lifts. So comfortably slow down that drawdown as much as possible until the 15th. But that was basically auto-regulating. And then we see today higher discharge rates because it has regulated to that higher, or it's basically self-regulated. So it's a several hour process for that dam when you go into new operating mode system to judge what water level we're at, what it needs to discharge. So it would be similar for me flipping it from manual to automatic. It has to re-regulate and go through its operating systems. It would be the same as going through seasonal change as well.
Okay. Thank you.
But it is operating as intended and drawing down as intended. We have dropped down a couple inches throughout this period. I believe last time I checked, we were at 8.07. And we are going to be going to 7.63. Like I said, hopefully looking to see if we can hit that 7.63 right on the head on the 15th.
Thank you.
Eric, I wonder if it's your role or if there's some way that we could have a condensed bit of your report put into the Lake Mills Leader so that people are aware of some of the issues that we're discussing here in print form, being the boat lift issue, being the beach, not the beach, the mobile home sewage issue. 'Cause to me, these are stories. And I just wonder if there would be a way we could say, here's what's going on and here's what the city is doing about it or what the plan is.
I would have to reference Drake and Dan on it as far as what's get published and what gets posted on either social media or the paper. I'm fine with doing public notices on a lot of these things as far as updates, but I would have to run it past them as well. As far as what gets published, I will say Abigail, the new reporter for the Leader, is extraordinarily proactive in getting stories, which is great. She is a good interviewer as well. I'm not opposed to any social outreach by any means or social or public notifications, but I would have to speak to Drake and Dan as far as what it would be, what they would want me to be posting on it.
I think that's fair, and Mary, being a representative from the city council, I think most citizens don't want to be surprised. And if we can say, well, we did this and we did this and it was in this paper, that will alleviate it. And it might also help us with public comments, that if people have some sort of factual frame of reference as to when it happened and why it's happening, that would help us with, moving forward with the plans and the such for the Parks Board. So thank you. Any other questions for Eric or on the director's report? Oh, I did have one, I apologize. Reviewing several special event permits. So is there anything that you could add to that? I don't know exactly what that means.
That's a pretty common occurrence. Normally in spring, we receive a huge influx of special events permits. It goes through a permitting system. Each department head within the city has to review these. Parks is very applicable for special events permits because they normally occur in parks. Right now, we're reviewing like our homecoming parades for both Lakeside as well as Lake Mills, Witches Night Out. Each Firefly Market goes through a special events permitting process. Music in the Mills. Anything that's occurring within the city goes through normally a special events permitting process, and we review them.
Our regular nice things about Lake Mills. sort of
Yep,
thing.
it just kind of goes seasonally as well. We're kind of at the end of summer, so the summer events are kind of dying down. We're just seeing the influx of fall events now.
Thank you. Moving on the agenda, let's take a look at the next part of this is the public comments and including emails. Any to note? Mary?
I already had referenced, I had received several emails on the fall drawdown observations and then correspondence on Sandy Beach. Just a question. On Sandy Beach.
What about Sandy Beach?
Oh, just a question on what's going on with the restaurant, which is, was noted in Eric's report.
Thank you, Mary. Any other public comments or emails? All right, thank you. Then let's, agenda item 7, creating a notice to request public comment regarding our recommendations on the next steps, and that we unanimously said we weren't going to dredge the mill pond, but I know we had some.
Mechanically harvest.
Mechanically, yes, thank you. Dredge or mechanically harvest the mill pond. What we did have some discussions as to whether or not fishing piers would be installed or improved. There was a discussion about a potential boardwalk. And then there was the Motorless watercraft launch or launches. How do we want to prioritize these? Do we want to have a discussion? Do we want to just say, help me out with that, please?
If I could describe a couple of the attachments that I have for you and kind of what the intent was behind me, if I could.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So looking at some of the priorities that all of you have been discussing, trying to maximize as much recreation opportunities with as little impact as possible, I looked at several other previous projects that I was involved in. A pier system like the ones that I have attached, I feel like are as much of a Swiss Army knife as possible for recreation opportunities. So the two drawings that you have are two different pricing opportunities, both by the same manufacturer. But this really is, we wouldn't be locked into any of these by any means whatsoever. This is just a very rough representation of what something like this may cost, and they're extraordinarily modular. You can change whatever you want on these to fit the needs. I just thought looking at some of the needs and recreation opportunities you guys discussed, these were the most applicable to reach out to as many user groups as possible.
And Eric, well, how would you describe these as what?
These
Floating?
are, yeah, modular floating fishing piers, also with non-motorized watercraft access. Yep, this is specifically for non-motorized watercraft access. So what I see with both of these drawings, they're just various degrees of size, really, that it comes down to for the most part, is it gets people a little bit out further into the water, provides a designated access for non-motorist watercraft, but also provides an opportunity for shoreline fishing, or at least to get out of the shoreline a little bit more. And then at the same time, just has an opportunity for people to hang out, enjoy the actual, I see a lot of people potentially using this for bird watching, for whatever, sunbathing on more of a pad style pier like this. You have more mobility and room to move on these. So you could have several people using these, doing different things of recreation. And the nice thing is that these piers are specifically designed for handicap use due to the kicker rails that you see on the outside for wheelchair access. And then this style of kayak launch was actually designed and implemented by disabled veterans who didn't have use of all of their limbs, so it's easy for elderly or other people to actually launch on these. And I've been a part of the installation of very similar piers to this several different times, and they've been extraordinarily popular for ease of use and just general recreation access. They are very much a cookie cutter product in the best way possible. And what I mean by that is they are not custom. They are tailored to what we want. You can pick and choose different features that you want. It is really the Lego kit of basically floating fishing pier kayak access. So this is kind of what I thought would be the most applicable for some of the recreation opportunities you guys are talking about.
So Eric, just for clarification, and I know this was also included in the attachments, but just, this is drawing 1.
Yep.
And this is right now, our bid is about 68,373 for this rendering. If I'm not mistaken. And then drawing number 2 is when it's a little less surface area, but and price is about $3,000 less. So, but those are, where were you envisioning these being installed?
I could see several different areas, and let me say too, those prices, we can go with any contractor in the world. There are several different companies who make similar products. These are just ones that I'm familiar with, that I've had good luck with, that seem sustainable. So these really aren't, like I said, there are several different companies and manufacturers that make similar products. But I could see 2 different options to where these could be installed. One being on Veterans Lane, separate from the actual boat launch itself, and then one being off of Bartles Beach on Ferry Drive. And the reason why I can see that is there previously was a small little pier that came out off of the east side of Bartles Beach. The nice thing I see about that is Bartles Beach obviously has a substantial amount of people there. You would have substantial access here. If someone wants to go on the beach, but perhaps the other members of the family want to go shoreline fish, you have that opportunity. There's also parking available there as well, to where you could park on the east side of Bartles Beach and you wouldn't have to drag your canoe or kayak across the street. This would be somewhat easy accessible at that location on the east side of Ferry Drive. And then perhaps off of Veterans Lane, there would be an opportunity to basically install this anywhere along Veterans Lane, separate from the existing boat launch, or in fact, one of the boat launch piers could be removed in favor of this. It could be an option as well. Mill Pond has a dual pier boat launch. You could leave one remaining pier there for motorboat launching, and you could install something like this and just perhaps have it L-shaped so it doesn't impede the boat launch itself, and have it access off of Veterans Lane. So there could be substantial spots where these could be installed.
I just want to comment on your ferry or your Bartles Beach. I'm a huge advocate for additional fishing space. I go by Bartles Beach, I don't know, 10 times a day, because that's my main thoroughfare to get places. I have a big concern about adding kayak access there. The
Valid.
when that is narrow, the traffic, in particular in the morning, especially during school days, is extremely fast and heavy, because the students all cut through there going to Lakeside Lutheran. And just in the summer, the number of people that park over by the Manleys, like their beautiful, that used to be the ice cream store. When they pull out there, they have room to get their kayaks out because the road, you're not hitting the road. But when the kayak folks park right in the normal parking, pull-in nose spots, I think we called them that, it is really challenging. Their kayak comes out into the driving lanes, and I think it's extremely unsafe. So I really think fishing would be awesome because there's still a lot of kids hanging over the bridge and the walkway of the bridge. One today was like tucked down in between the bridge and I don't know, it was kind of scary, and the viaduct thing, but I think fishing for sure. I would be worried about kayak. I want to still think more about that part, but I love this concept back on veterans for sure, where I think the parking would be much safer, if you will.
And then I see it too, it's, that gives you an opportunity for watercraft unloading. So you could park near these piers or near the boat launch, unload your kayak or canoe, park your vehicle, and then you would be able to use this launch. Like I said, you would still have the piers there to where you'd be able to get in a watercraft, so I see it being somewhat redundant there for non-motorized watercraft access, like you do have the piers there. This is much easier to board though because it has the actual guide rails and everything, so it would increase the ease of use and user accessibility. It's a great product, and like I said, you could really change the shape of this too, so wherever you would want to orientate a pier like this for whatever location you're installing it in, you can modulate and move it around however you would really like. The way that I would see is you could create a separate abutment or interface along Veterans Drive, but then you're kind of congesting traffic in the fire lane there. If you were to designate it actually closer to the existing boat launch, I think you wouldn't plug up fire department traffic as much, and it would be a little bit safer in that area. Plus, you already have people who are loading and unloading things in that location. So I don't want to remove recreational access by removing one of the boat launch piers, but there is already an existing interface there. You could remove that pier, install one of these, and then you have increased fishing and kayak opportunities, but you would still have one motorboat access pier is one of my thoughts. I would say that would be my less intrusive option to install something like this.
Just in my observations, I feel like not Veterans Lane, Mill Pond Park is relatively underutilized. A lot of people don't even know it's there. I was talking to one of my friends here in town, and I mentioned Mill Pond Park, and they didn't know what that was.
So it could be a destination or increase recreation.
I'd advocate more for if we're considering installing one of these, doing so at Mill Pond Park. And I walked there this afternoon before the meeting just to kind of look at it because I hadn't been there. And
Where is Bill?
yeah. Oh, it's just the Veterans Lane. I mean, it's not much. It's kind of just the road right of way extended out a little bit towards the mill pond.
As you're facing the mill pond on the fishing pier where it is now, is it to the left or the right?
So it's between the VFW and the boat launch, right?
Yep.
That's how you describe it. And so if we're considering something like this, I think that would be a good place to do so, to try to, increase recreational activity there. But I think in doing so, there's a couple improvements that would probably be necessary. This afternoon, so if you're on Veterans Lane, looking at the boat launch, on the left side, there's that gravel area that people can park at. I think it'd be good to designate actual parking stalls there. Right now, this afternoon, it looks like the fire department was doing some training back there. There's a bunch of, I guess, wrecked vehicles that they're probably working with that it was starting to somewhat impede that area. So that maybe have to be a discussion with the fire department. How many parking stalls would we be able to install here and not impede, your activities? I don't think there'd be really space for parking stalls on the roadway.
I don't think there would be either because that is a fire lane. That entire lane is non-parking, just for first responders. But I do agree, I mean, that is a gravel drive. I believe, and I'm not quite sure, I think the reason why it was gravel is because they do vehicle burns there and trainings. And then I think the next thing too is the proximity to the water. It was supposed to be a permeable surface, I think, in that location, so there might be a permeable versus or impervious paving requirements that would require further research on that. But I do agree, I mean, there's not been, resources to develop Mill Pond area really since I believe those boat launches were installed. And that's been quite some time. I do agree in the fact that if you were to install something like this, people would come. The old saying, if you build it, they will come. I think this would increase more people going to that location. Perhaps it would be the designated spot for kayak access instead of people using Bartles Beach where it's unsafe. So if you're creating a specific location for it, I can see that. And then you're right, though, the detriment being there's not adequate parking.
Do we know who owns the shoreline behind Sunshine and the VFW and Steve's? Does their property go to the Mill Pond, or does the city own a certain portion of that?
That's still
frontage?
public shoreline section. So the actual property itself is owned by the VFW, but that lakefront property there would still be a section of public property. So the mowed and maintained, trimmed areas, that's the VFW. That actual parking lot is actually a city parking lot.
Okay, and I don't think people realize that the parking behind Sunshine and such is city parking.
But the shoreline, it's,
The grass is VFW.
Yeah, grass is VFW, that's VFW property, but that shoreline is still, like if you were to pull up our GIS maps as well, when I included the actual property boundaries for public versus private shoreline, that would still be public shoreline.
And what it's making me ask the question is that might be also a place you could put a pier. Because, you know, the people using the restaurant, the brewery, such, and if they knew that was a public park, they could park their vehicles there and launch or fish from that place, potentially.
And are you still planning on having like a public comment period for this? So perhaps you can come up with a couple options like, hey, this is what we talked about here, a couple viable locations for something like this. What is the general public input? The way that I see it is as close as you can get your watercraft to unload it, the more people are going to use it is my thought. That's why I'm kind of thinking the boat launch, but I think this would be appropriate to ask at public comment. What are your guys' thoughts? What's the best purpose for you guys to use? What is the general public thinking? Or perhaps there's expert kayakers out there who have some recommendations or something.
Part of what I'm thinking is that the fishing could be behind the parking lot, and the launching could be at the present place. So you wouldn't have commingling per se, but it's close enough that if you,
so 2 piers, Tim.
well, the
Well,
one is
I
already
mean-
there.
Okay.
Yeah, we already have the piers for launching on Veterans Lane. I would just stay that. Correct. And I'm thinking maybe potentially for fishing, they could have the one a little bit north, you know, of that. And then maybe some sort of adaptation for kayak launching at the present launch.
Perfect. I'm glad you brought that up, Tim, because while the existing piers, the boat launch piers are non-handicap accessible, that's the kind of beauty of having a modular system like this. When you see this actual section here, this kayak launch section, that can be attached to existing piers.
Yes, so I do think that's worth pursuing. And also, just to continue with this conversation as to these piers, are these going to be at the, I label them street end piers also?
These ones not necessarily, because the ones at the pier ends cannot be floating. They have to have actual legs to them based on the way they're installed. This one is a floating pier. I did research that in as well. This is based on the contractor's recommendation, just the water depth there and how those actual piers attach to the interfaces at the street end piers itself. Those would have actual leg supports to them, to whereas these do not. These would be floating but permanent piers. They would be in the water year round.
It was interesting on Sandy Beach there, Bartles Beach, that section right next to the old building that's owned by Phil Manley, that is an unofficial kayak launching site. and people use that all the time. They back right up there and they go. And one of my issues, and I will be pursuing this over the off-season, is the motorized traffic that comes in that channel. And I have videos of them taking off from there on tubes. I have kids swimming under those lines, going right into that channel. So I think when we're looking at, I'd just be intrigued to see, I don't think you're going to change the kayakers. It's too convenient. And you're going to have to take action to stop the motorboats from coming in. Primarily, they come in to pick people up or drop them off to use the bathroom. And it'd be much safer, and I'm showing my hand here, if we directed them to go south of the swimming pier. Because nobody, or very few people, go under over there. But everybody's in that channel, and we're just asking for trouble.
I think that was discussed when they were doing some changes or some concepts for the concrete retaining wall replacement. So I think that is, yeah, and I think that's somewhere in the discussion over the years, because that's a very valid point, Mike, is that we want people to use things, but we also want to minimize any conflicts or.
It's just asking for it.
Yeah, so thank you. So going back, Craig, you had I just want to get us back to the, review, discuss, update the recommendations. So right now, we've been talking about the fishing piers and potential public comment. And we've been talking about the Motorless watercraft launches. Is there discussion regarding the Boardwalk that was mentioned at the previous meeting as to our recommendations? Has there been a plan? Is there any other updates on the Boardwalk? Similar to what is it, Mud Lake that has the Boardwalk? I've
done minimal research regarding that. I do know that there was a past permit not submitted, but at least authored for a potential boardwalk to go through basically the marshy area in the mill pond. I believe the permitting process would be substantially more difficult for it, and the costs associated would be substantially more. I could get cost estimates for maybe like a floating boardwalk or something, but I do know the cost would be astronomically more than the near $70,000 for a system like this. I just focused my current efforts with the time I had specifically for the kayaking and fishing access. I think the majority of recreation focuses on those. I think a boardwalk would be great. I just haven't done as much additional research onto a boardwalk.
Would someone from the Department of Natural Resources know what it costs to create that boardwalk? And I'm not talking as long as the one that's down there at Mud Lake, but something similar to that?
I mean, I've installed boardwalks similar to that in projects. I know they're well over $100,000 to install a boardwalk of that size, but it depends on what type. Would it be a floating, or would it have pilings and legs? I believe the pilings and legs would not be adequate for the mill pond just due to the depth of the muck and soil and sediment there. You have constant settling issues with boardwalks like that, so I believe a floating boardwalk would be the best bet in that location. But it would be, if you kind of think of each one of these sections in this modular system, you can see a breakdown of what each of those floating sections would be. It would basically be a continuation or a long linear path of these floating sections. But I do know that some similar boardwalks that we've installed have been upwards of well over $100,000. But this is several years ago in very different counties and different projects.
I believe part of the discussion with the boardwalk is it'd be going from the south part of the pier west from the fire station would be one of the boardwalks, and how far out it went, I don't know. I don't know if we even thought about boardwalks on the west, southwest part coming, towards east towards the fire station, which would be south of the flow. But anyway, to me, I just bring it up to see if that's something to bring into the public comment, and do we have amounts of money, and then the amount of people that would want to use it? Because right now that I haven't walked on it for probably a year or more, but there used to be the Eagle Scout boardwalk in the marsh itself, which might now have been sunk.
This is why,
There.
Well, it's rickety. I think it was rickety when it was first built, but
this is why a floating, if a boardwalk section is decided to be pursued or researched, I would highly emphasize a floating sections.
I guess I'm struggling to see what recreational access improvement there would be for a boardwalk compared to a structure like these floating piers with the um, with the kayak canoe launches.
Well, I have a perspective, so, well, because I am the one that originally, I think, brought up Boardwalk quite a while ago. The walking bridge on South Ferry that parallels the sidewalk bridge that parallels the road. Not the arcing one that's by the lake, but the sidewalk turns into a little bridge on South Ferry over the channel, is consumed with families and kids fishing off of it. So one of the suggestions I had, was brainstorming when we were thinking about tonight's discussion is, could you put another one of those bridge sidewalks just on the other side of South Ferry? Now, that's kind of tough because there's no sidewalk. It'd be all alone. We'd have to think of how do you create safe infrastructure to get people over there to get on just that little new bridge on the other side, because there's always people fishing off of it. So now this is a huge, I think it'd be more than $100,000 when I look at the pictures that we had from our last meeting, that if you went from South Ferry all the way across to the Fireman's and gave people access from the beach straight to downtown, rather than walking on the sidewalk through the neighborhood, which is a beautiful, beautiful homes along that route. And yes, and gorgeous gardens, Mike's included, absolutely gorgeous gardens. That would be, I would speculate there'd be a lot of people fishing off of it. Now, would it be impeded because of the vegetation in there? I wouldn't be the right person to answer that question. But would people be fishing off of it if it was, they could get to the open channel where the boats are? And would it be a popular place to walk to get from point A, which is Bartles Beach area, to downtown? I don't know. And I look at all of the investments the city is talking about making, and Sandy Beach being one of them right now as a critical investment. Depending how much this costs, it may be pushed out quite a few years, unless you can find ways like this. 65,000 doesn't scare me, because it's not hundreds of thousands. Because I really think, I was mentioning when you stepped out, Eric, I think hundreds low. To get, if you were
I
to
would
take this
agree,
all the way,
yeah.
now maybe it's crazy to go all the way, and that wouldn't really be beneficial. Maybe it's just a small boardwalk that goes, I don't know, 100 feet, I don't know how many feet out.
I
But,
will
just, it might add more fishing, and it might, maybe a little sidewalk on their side's better, I don't know.
I see, there is a disconnect between Bartles and downtown. You have the obstacles, and the only way to access downtown from Bartles is either Lake Street or go all the way up to Phillips Lane. However, there is, I don't know if anyone is aware, there is a small nature trail that actually goes around the west end or the south end of Mill Pond. I think there can be substantially less expenditures beefing that up, doing some renovation areas to that, doing some vegetation removal, some clearing along that nature trail, perhaps actually doing trail base, either like a clover base or a wood chip base as well along that, and make that easier to access and improve it. And then you would have an additional pedestrian route from Bartles, or at least Ferry Drive, to downtown. I don't think much maintenance has been done there in several years since it was built as per an Eagle Scout project several years ago. So I see potential renovation needs there, and I would like to see, it kind of fills a similar niche. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do at that location is fish. You don't have fishing access with that, but you do have a pedestrian route that is not a road connecting Bartles Beach and downtown.
So Eric, I've walked that frequently, and sometimes the trees go down. Then does your department get notified and clear the?
Very, very rarely. Very rarely are we notified along that nature trail. We do walk it along our own as well. What I would like to do, and I've talked about this with my staff as well, this is a project I think would be easily done when we have summer staff for next year. We try to plan out a lot of those physically involved projects where it's just physical labor. Clearing that trail is physical, it takes time, it's brush cutting. We would schedule those projects when we have the staff and the hands available to do them. We've already talked about that being a project for the 2025 season when we have seasonal staff available. Like I said, it was built, and I think it's a fantastic underutilized resource. It's a pretty small walk too, but it's nice.
It's a great bird walk.
Yeah,
And I think someone's cutting their way through because several trees have gone down
Yep.
and then they disappear after a week.
Exactly. So I can see further development of that or betterment or improvement of that before we pursue a boardwalk would be my thoughts. Like I said, that was an Eagle Scout project several years ago, and I think it just needs a little bit of tender love and time put onto it and prioritized for maintenance before we move on to something else larger. So I would like to repair existing infrastructure and opportunities before we install something else, and I think this would be a fairly low-cost option to do that. We just need to do it when we have the seasonal staff on board.
What I would request, and especially going to the issue of public comment, is try to base it on some details as to cost. So if we could get an idea of Mary's idea of going a boardwalk that went from Ferry Drive to Veterans Lane on the south part of the mill pond, floating to not impede water or, fish and such, it'd be an option. The other thing, though, I'm thinking, if we do that, and people do have access, this nice boardwalk from Rock Lake, now walking to downtown, there's gonna be, somebody's gonna ask for a pier on the shore of the Rock Lake so they can put their boat there so they can walk the boardwalk to downtown to the restaurant or such.
Are you saying mooring, like
Yes.
staging your boat there?
Yes. The good news of that is it'd give people access to downtown. It also wouldn't mean we'd have to have raising the bridge on Ferry Drive so people can get their pontoons there. But I'm saying just futurist, if you do that and make this nice access, I think we just need to plan, get some numbers as to what, if this, then maybe this. But again, that to me is all part of public comment and planning, to Mary's point. And this might be a 2030 deal. But I think if you get numbers, at least then you're making decisions based on costs.
If I use the existing, I forget, I believe it's EasyDock. Yeah, EasyDock. EasyDock is this modular system that I was referring to, kind of with the kicker rails for wheelchair access and everything else. I can get a quote for it, and they'll have a breakdown very similar to what they provided me here with the kayak sections. Like I said, just looking at previous comments, I kind of agreed with McCray. I think at least judging from my thoughts, it seemed like the priority was prioritizing public fishing access and then kayak access. But I can do further research into a boardwalk.
Well, I think we should continue, before we give Eric an assignment, maybe we can continue like the conversation around other ideas that maybe anyone, because that was, we were preparing for, I thought we were, going to talk about other ideas before we give an assignment, because that might not, I don't know, maybe it's not the
No,
most purposeful way to spend our money.
I just wanted to bring it up to ask if he could do it. I'm not saying we
Yeah.
should do it. I just say,
I
is
just wanna
that
make
something
sure
that would
that-
be in his realm? So no, that's an excellent point.
Just before we leave the nature trail, I think if, it's a great idea and it's underutilized, but there is no designated access across Ferry Drive. So if we were to do that, I would look into one of those wonderful little push-button things that then has the yellow flashing lights, because that's a freeway and a speedway. Because you go over the bridge to the south, maybe 50 yards, and then you cut across.
No sidewalk.
And it's, that would be good to have a crossing.
So I
or
can
stop.
see, these would be I can speak to some of these, but it would be outside of the scope of my department. But the first thing that I potentially see there is the sidewalk is on the west end of Ferry Drive. So that would require a crosswalk crossing Ferry Drive, and those are called RRFBs. Those are rapid response flashing beacons. So it's pedestrian crossing zone similar to what's on Madison Street by the middle school. Would have to reference our streets department and our public works department. I believe we have estimated costs of what those would be. I could at least provide that. I think that would be easy, but it would be someone else from a different department. But I know those are frequently discussed, so I could also look into that.
You'd have to, just something, because right now there's a little sign, hiking sign. If you know to look for it, you go there, but you're crossing a pretty active thoroughfare.
And it does have to be accessed via foot. There's no parking along that section either, so you would have to use the sidewalk and then cross Ferry Drive and access that trail.
Has
Correct.
anyone walked that trail? Yes. Okay, so you come out like way in the back, weird, right behind the fire department, and it's actually a long haul. If you were at the beach and you're trying to get downtown, that's the last place I would go. I would cut across this grand idea of a boardwalk, or I'd go take Lake Street or kind of walk around. It is scenic. It's quite lovely. I snowshoed it last year in the snowstorm to get downtown. It was just lovely. It's a beautiful park. I just think and I am getting crazed, right, if we're talking about like fishing and access and things when we were talking earlier, and well, you had mentioned it, Eric, I'm not sure that that park might need some improvements, but it applies to what we're trying to solve here.
And I think it's a very valid point, Mary, that, remember, our charge is the recommendations for more use of the mill pond area. So if people are aware of that, and even this discussion where people know where it is, or the part about the Mill Pond Park, any of this stuff is gonna help people have access and use, with, at least in my estimation, not a tremendous amount of expenditure. So all those are good in getting at the resolution. So thank you for that. Going now, again, returning to Mary's comment, we talked about recommendations, fishing piers, we've talked about motorless watercraft launches, we've talked about a boardwalk. What other ideas are we looking at as far as recommendations that we want public comment on?
I had a couple. I had mentioned the designating parking stalls previously. I think if we are, especially if we were doing improvements to the park that would promote recreational access, I think it'd be a good idea to have a sign on Main Street at the intersection of Veterans Lane and Main Street, indicating boat launch, kayak launch type of thing. Because I think a lot of people don't know about it. Also, like 6 months ago, we were kind of, seemed like we were going the direction of dredging the whole mill pond. Excuse me for 1 second. And we've obviously changed our mind from all the information that we got from the folks at the DNR and the folks from Jefferson County. And we learned a lot about kind of the natural resources present at the mill pond and why it's kind of special. And I think a really good and inexpensive improvement could be to put some signage highlighting the native wildlife and both the flora and the fauna there. I took a look at the signs that were there today, and they're all just like fishing regulations, ordinances. Some of the signs were outdated and faded. So I think that could give the park a substantial facelift there, improving signage.
Glad you brought that up. Has anyone visited Astalon State Park recently, within the past couple of years? Astalon State Park has the historical signage or interpretive signage. I designed that and installed them, and I think they're fantastic, and I could see something very similar along the mill pond. So I think that's a fantastic response. Public education is fantastic because then it increases, for one, public awareness, but also interest. If people don't know about something and they're educated about it, then they're going to continue looking for it. So I actually think that would be a fantastic idea and fairly low cost, low impact option to do it as well.
And I'll add, I had a conversation with Erin from the DNR after the last meeting, and she was really excited that we're talking about education opportunities. I don't know if there are any DNR grants or anything in that space, because when we were talking about the boardwalk, I think she was visualizing somewhere that where you're on your boardwalk, you actually have signs of the different frogs or whatever. I think she was very excited and said she'd love to work with us on making sure whatever it is happened, and we can start with signage on land. Should we not desire to do a boardwalk thing, or you could maybe figure out a way to do signage around in a creative way, and around.
Yeah.
I don't know, like whatever we land, but I think that's a great idea.
Exactly. So similar to like the story walk at Wallace too. I mean, it's something that both kids and adults can enjoy. So I think it really bridges age gaps as well. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm losing my voice, but I think the last idea that I had was before I actually lived here in town. me and a couple friends met up here and we kayaked from Tyranina Park down to, we took out in the muddy little section right next to the VFW, and went to the brewery and a couple places downtown. And I think if we have something like this available, that would increase that type of traffic. And I don't know what the options are, but for temporary or very short-term kayak or canoe storage might be a good idea. Just a place where someone could, if they wanted to, kayak around, come downtown, they'd have a place to lock up a kayak, so it's not just sitting in the grass for, an extended period of time. I don't know what the options are out there for that type of thing. That could be something to look into.
Very common. We have long-term storage long-term kayak storage down at Sandy Beach. They're kayak racks. So you can stack them vertically on top of each other, and you can put a bike lock. It's as simple as basically a bike lock around it. Again, they're fairly unobtrusive. I mean, there'd be multiple spots where something like that could be installed. It would come down to enforcement just to make sure it's not being abused, just like any other feature within the parks as well. Make sure people aren't using it for long-term storage, the intent being downtown business access. So, I mean, again, that could also be a very low-cost, low-impact option.
Just to that point, I was down in Governor Dodge and kayaking in, I think it was Cox Lake, but they have a long, like cable that people can pull up onto the shore, and they can, like a bike lock, and put their stuff there. I do not know if it's permanent, or it seems that they can leave them there, but I don't think that's what we're looking at. It's been a long time since I've tried to register. You don't register non-motorized watercraft, right?
Not in Wisconsin.
So there wouldn't be.
I think it has to be a certain size, because if you're sailboat.
Well, I'm just saying, what I'm saying is if somebody pulls a kayak there and leaves it there, there's nothing on that kayak that identifies who owns it. So that, to me, that would be an issue of the enforcement. If someone just, put it there, they pull it up there, they lock it, all right, they lock it.
Yeah.
So well, you could say that, but again.
Then we take it.
Then, okay, well, anyway, I just say that, I think we should, it might not be so bad as if somebody left it there either. It kind of depends on where it was and how big it was, but if that's what we want, and it didn't seem to be bad at all at both at Lake Koskinen, they have like a rental and the same thing, and at the Governor Dodge, it was deal. So, just things again to consider, but I think it's a great idea.
I mean, if you do want to pursue long-term storage, I like the fact of making things entry-level accessible. So like entry-level kayakers or people who want to go grab a beer downtown or something like that. I think that's great. If you want to pursue long-term storage, like I said, we do have already a lease structure for long-term storage at Sandy Beach. They pay an annual fee. They get a number on that rack that is their number to store their watercraft, and they lock it. I like the idea, like I said, of having easily accessible and publicly accessible storage, but if that is an option you would like to pursue, it's also there.
So I think you were kind of talking about mooring, so you're going to just temporarily, not permanently. Is
Yeah,
that kind of
that
you
was
were-
what I was thinking was,
Yeah.
you coming downtown, going to a brewery or restaurant, couple hour type of thing, rather than, long-term.
The other option I was, to the signage and the education, turtle crossing or the things like that, I'm looking at potentially some signage around the restroom there that's at Bartles Beach, because as you're waiting to use the facilities, it might be not a bad idea to have some signage there about the history of Rock Lake and the flora and fauna. And you could have it also on the other side where the launch is, where the fishing is. Maybe something there, a nice kiosk. I know they have them at most of the state parks. And so a lot of it is near where the launches are, because you're waiting anyway. You might as well get some education.
I absolutely like that, and one thing that I would like to mention as well, this is just if I have the ability to voice an opinion, I had an absolute blast when I was doing the history research for the mill pond and the mill and everything. I think this community has a huge support of heritage and historical significance as well. Like where you're standing, this is where this was 150 years ago. I think there could also be naturalist education as well as just local history education as well. I think that would definitely go hand in hand to what Legendary Lake Mills is doing with some of their historical building projects. So just an idea as well. You know, you mentioned like the Bartles Beach Boathouse. I mean, that's historical structure and there's historical photos of it. So just a thought. I absolutely like the idea of educational signage.
And so to McCrae's suggestion about the signage on Main Street, so whose responsibility for going forward would that be?
That would be mine. That would be a DOT permit for a right-of-way because it's on the state highway. It's a fairly simple permitting process. Normally what happens is the county highway department installs those signs on a route. So what they'll do is they'll do like a northern section of Highway 89, install all of their right-of-way signs, and this would just be included in that. I don't know what their schedule would be. I applied for the Tree City USA sign installations near, well, actually at the north and south entrances of town through this exact same process. So I've done it before. They haven't been installed yet, but it is at the discretion of the county, but it is a state permit. It can be done. It just takes time.
Okay, thank you.
It honestly, it's a very easy permit.
Okay, thank you. Colton, I have a question for you that you might not have an answer, but maybe you could say this is a person you want to check. And this goes back to the kayaking and canoeing use and such, and I'm talking about Aztalan. And if you go down to that, you know, towards Crawfish River, you can walk down there, but there's nothing really there's not, to my knowledge, a place to launch a kayak or canoe or anything like that. So if we're trying to expand, you know, our abilities, who do we ask about kayak access from Aztalan to Crawfish?
Glacial Heritage Trail, I believe you're referencing, is what the Glacial Heritage Trail or organization is. Are you saying from like Aztalan State Park or
Yeah, I mean, you got the parking lot there, and you can go walk down to the Crawfish. But to my knowledge, there's nothing there that for launching a kayak or canoe or anything like that from that part. And I just say, are you familiar with what I'm speaking of? Is that part of your?
That would be Wisconsin DNR.
I know that park and stuff. I've been there. I just don't think they have like
No.
Yeah.
Because
it's the state park.
Yep, I was the previous property manager there.
Okay, I just bring it up because
just-
to me, that'd be a kind of a nice place. We're talking about kayaking and such. That'd be a nice place to maybe give another option for the people in the area to use. But I just bring it up to get a little detail.
So there is the Glacial Heritage Waterway route or waterway trails. You may see some of those signs. We have one at Tyranina. We have one at Mill Pond. There are several along the county and various other areas as well. It's basically the waterway equivalent of the Ice Age Trail, if you can think of it like that for the most part. I'm not sure if that organization is still around or active, but I mean, it previously was a thing. And if you go to the Mill Pond, you will see a Glacial Heritage sign there as well.
So giving our review, discuss, update Mill Pond recommendations, where are we at on agenda item number 7? And we've got these pier, are we looking for public comment on these pier options, or is that part of a subset I, fishing piers?
I would say it kind of goes with, are you saying requesting, you are going to have a separate public hearing? Is that what you're asking for?
I believe that's what we are saying. We created a notice to ask for public comment regarding the recommendations. So are we looking for recommendations as to which of these pier options that were?
I wouldn't think so. I would just say gather what the majority of the public interest is for developments. You could say we're looking at options for fishing piers, for boardwalks, for motorless watercraft, for potential educational signage. You can say very high level, like this is kind of what we're looking at, and then just see what the public response and recommendations are, would be my thought.
Okay, so these are examples. We're not making
No,
any
yeah,
decisions. on it.
absolutely. These are
Okay.
very, very rough examples.
Okay.
Tim, just so we know, I mean, I assume if we have a public discussion, the question is going to be, why can't we water ski there? Why aren't we dredging it? I mean, because that's going to be a main point, I should think.
You would have to say that that decision has been made. I mean, you guys have made the recommendation to not dredge. That ship has sailed. What you are now soliciting public comment on is specifically recreational opportunities,
Okay.
an example for some of the things that you're listing. So dredging and weed harvesting would not be options as you voted against it. So you're
Correct.
soliciting public comment specifically on these topics.
We need to expand on why we voted no. That was the overwhelming consensus. No,
It-
okay, good.
It wouldn't even be included in that discussion.
I think that's something with our final report to city council, we can clarify the reasons why. But if we're looking just for public comment about these couple options we have listed, people might ask the question, but we can just respond that we're not discussing that here.
Right, and I'm not trying to push this up to the city council. I think our role is to make a recommendation. I mean, the city council can decide whatever they want to do as going forward. But I think right now, our recommendation to the city council, based on all the information we have, is no harvesting, no dredging. And a lot of it has to do with the documents that Mary was looking at, the depth, the fact that there's all sorts of native habitat. So that, to me, as a board, we said, we don't need it. Now, the next part of it, though, is, all right, given that, though, we still have the charge of making it accessible to more people and using it as a resource. And that's why the comment that Mary brought up in the brainstorming about a boardwalk that gives access, another fishing bridge that gives more access to people, the piers, as Erica showed, at whatever different locations, and the watercraft launches or storage, I think to me are all things that we want to.
How much more do we have to flesh this all out before we have a public comment session?
I'll give you an answer. That's what we're here for. So maybe we just say, all right, here's what we want you to talk about. We've got this, which one is your priority? We still make the decision as the board to recommend to the city council. I just think, though, we want to make sure that the people have an ability to say in rank order, I think the fishing piers are the biggest thing, or I think the motorless launch is the biggest thing.
Yep. I would agree with Tim. I think listing them specifically just as bullet points, as we kind of have them on the agenda here, would be the most appropriate. You could say we're looking at fishing piers, boardwalk options, motorless watercraft launches. You can say interpretive educational signage, just listing them like that. The purpose of having the public comment too is maybe they bring a different idea or expand on one of those ideas a little bit more than we previously hadn't thought about. So honestly, I would say that leaving it in almost a bullet point format would be the best. You're looking for creative input from the public.
I would probably like to also add as a specific bullet, like parking improvements, as a topic of discussion or comment.
So is that something we could, to Eric's point, to your point, McCray, so we can go back for the public comment, we're getting public comments on fishing piers. We're getting public comment on boardwalk. We're getting public comment on watercraft launches and parking, accessibility,
And signage.
and signage.
And nature path, these are what I have down in vision, nature path, designated parking stalls, temporary short-term kayak, canoe storage.
Mike?
Sorry.
I would say, Mike, if I can correct you, I think the nature path is something that we can do.
Leave that out.
Yeah, we can do that internally. We just need the time to do it. We're already planning to do it, so I would leave that separate from the mill pond.
Then leaving that out, so we've got the three that Tim mentioned, designated parking stalls, temporary short-term kayak canoe storage downtown, signage, both educational and access to the new place. I think that's it.
Yeah,
I think
I would agree.
listing out a bunch of options will help people kind of generate thoughts and ideas too, rather than if we just had like 3 or 4.
Okay.
There might be kind of I don't really know what to.
Because I want to
talk
put
about
these
here.
in the minutes, I'd like to
Yes.
have this.
And I think as far as the public comment, we want to make sure that people know that sort of like on this Joint Rock Lake Committee agenda, they say, public comments, 2 minutes per person. You know, they have it delineated. I think we do the same thing for us, to say you got 2 minutes to make your comments. They've got here a maximum of 15 minutes, but whatever it would be.
Yep, I would agree, and that's, like I said, having that general outline that says the direction that you guys have been taking, kind of the traction that you have been taking on some of these topics, but someone could come forward and say, I know of this awesome place I visited that had this great feature, and they bring it up to you.
I also wanted to ask if it would be possible, so we have some general feel for potential pier costs. People, I think, will be asking, what kind of price range are we talking about with some of these options? So could we possibly get some kind of estimate, an updated estimate for a boardwalk or something, so that we would be able to at least, if that question comes up, be able to address that a little bit? Because that is going to be, I think, a concern. What are some cost options here?
Yep, I can do that. I think that would be the easiest one to do. The signage, I can give a very rough estimate on prior projects that I've done. The boardwalk, I think, would be really easy for me to do. If for some reason I have difficulty providing that or getting it, I can let you guys know. But, I mean, it took a couple phone calls and an email to get these, so I don't think it would be that big of a deal to get boardwalk costs.
And to go forth with Anita's comment, it would also be nice if we are going to have a kayak storage or such, what the cost would be, but also what the revenue would be.
Revenue specifically if you're looking for long-term storage. If it's a short-term option, I don't think there would really be associated fees for it. What I can do is I can provide the example of the existing Sandy Beach long-term storage one as far as what it costs for the residents to do the long-term storage, and that's seasonal storage. If it's short-term storage just to access downtown, I don't think we would pursue a fee for that. A kayak rack is couple $100 really, so it's not that much cost to it. But it depends on if you want to do long-term versus seasonal storage, or short-term versus long-term storage is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think we want to do more short-term to what,
It's up to your discretion.
yeah, but I think that would be like our recommendation is short-term. As an aside, how are we doing with the rental of the kayaks down at Sandy Beach?
I don't have the post-2024 seasonal update yet. The term is from Memorial Day to Labor Day, so that's coming up. You're saying the self-service rentals? But we were, I believe, the highest grossing or highest revenue source for that company for the 2023 season, and it was the first season they were at Sandy Beach.
That might be another option to maybe add up at Mill Pond.
Yeah, do we want to pursue an additional self-service kayak rental there? That would also be an option too.
Yeah, so I would add that as a bullet point.
And what sort of time period are we talking about, Tim, getting back to the notice asking for it? Are we looking like next month, December, or?
I don't know what the required notice is. I believe it does have to be posted in the paper as well, soliciting public comment or having a public hearing. I would have to get back to you. I think there could be one in October, though. If you plan for one in October, I think that would be appropriate. But I don't know exactly what the turnaround time would be for getting one posted. But I do know you have to post it publicly within the paper as well.
Yes, but I think that's doable, and if we do it and plan for it to be the October 14th or whatever the date is, I think that would behoove us for moving forward.
So you could plan for your next Parks Board meeting to be a portion of public hearing. Similar to what you did, I know we had public hearings for the initial Mill Pond when the dredging opportunity came up. You still conducted a normal meeting afterwards, but you had a section that was 45 minutes to an hour of public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
If I recall, Dan brought up that there's a difference between a public hearing and then just people coming up for their 2 minutes, which they're
You are
allowed to have it anyway. So we're basically just doing the standard meeting, but encouraging people to come and give their opinions, or no?
You would specifically list it as a public hearing.
We would, okay, so does that, but then do you limit them to 2 minutes? Oh, okay.
You can, yes.
Yeah, and I would say to your point, and thank you for that catch, Mike, is we might want to just label as public comment.
Yeah, I feel like there was confusion the last time we had the meeting that I think people are expecting a presentation, and we weren't prepared to do that. We weren't planning to do that. can we say we're soliciting public comments on this and just have it not listed as anything special, just our standard Parks Board meeting agenda, and then we can maybe bump it up a little bit higher of public comment, and then specifically list out the items that we're soliciting public comments on. Is that an option?
I think that would be appropriate. I'd have to clarify. I believe the last time like a public hearing was posted, it would say Parks Board is soliciting public comment regarding whatever. You could say regarding recreational improvements to the mill pond with your options listed below, but you would have to have a section specifically listed for a public hearing that is separate from public comment. So public comment is anything within the Parks Board scope is what they can comment on. The public hearing is specifically for the items that you are listing.
Well, we haven't been drawing a very large crowd recently.
It would be advertised. I do actually believe we are required to advertise when we have a public hearing.
Okay.
You have to post it. Post it,
Yep.
give it so many times, I think. Yeah.
Yep, so let me check in. I think October meeting, normal meeting date and time could be done, but I'd have to verify on what those posting requirements are that may dictate when the meeting is held. Because like I said, I think it has to be posted, maybe 2 paper runs for public hearing, but I'm not quite sure. So I would have to do some research.
And I'm going back to the joint Rock Lake Committee agenda, and they've got public comments and/or questions. And that's sort of where I was going as far as to have them come in and make comments, still got the limitations specific to the things on the bullet points, and then they can add things later. Because I want to be very careful, if we make it a hearing, that becomes, I think, a much more legal onus on us to, but I don't know, I'd have to ask Dan, or if we could get some other clarification on that.
We would have to consult Dan on some of these questions, yeah. But I do genuinely believe that a public hearing is genuinely the direction you guys would be going for this, to solicit public comment on it, is my thought.
And I guess my thought would be too, there would be more publicity, if you will, or about a public hearing if we would put it just in the body of an agenda. People may miss it, you know what I'm saying? So I think it gives more opportunity for people to know about it and know about it in advance, because sometimes what we hear is, we didn't know about it, you know, and that, so.
No, that's a very valid point, and we want to make sure it's involvement and transparent and we're accessible, so thank you for those comments. So is that something that you're going to pursue?
So I was just going to ask that. What I can do at this point is I will coordinate with you, Tim, communicate with you directly if that's fine. I want to make sure that we get all of our correct bullet points that we're going to be soliciting public comment for correct, but then I'll also include you in some of the specific questions for Dan, how we can actually legally pursue this, and I would like to include both you and I in that, and I think I can send the initial message from that point.
All right, that'd be wonderful. Is people okay with that?
I'll try to get the minutes done this week, the draft, so I can send you, because those will include those points, and you can amend them as you see fit. Because I'm leaving town for a week. then.
I've got them written down as
You do?
well, and yeah, like I said, I can start the initial conversation with Tim, and you and I can pursue it and see what we want to do for potential October public hearing.
So just so we're on the same page, then, do you want to just tell me what you've got written down for the points?
So the points that I have, let me go back to my sheets. I have the installation of fishing piers, boardwalk, motorless watercraft launch, improved parking access, interpretation and educational signage, and then short-term kayak storage.
And I think also kayak rental, sorry.
Kayak
I've mentioned
rental.
kayak rental.
Kayak rental would be 7, okay.
Okay.
So those are all 7 points that I have done.
All right, thank you. Any other items regarding agenda item number 7? If not, let's move to discussion, recommendation, acceptance of Bartles Beach bike rack donation, which is this document. Am I correct, Eric?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'd like to clarify on it as well, if I could.
Yes?
So I'm required before accepting any donations, I do have to have both Parks Board recommendation and City Council approval for any donations to go forward. So it's as per ordinance or as per policy. I was planning on actually installing bike racks at Bartles Beach and Wallace Park anyways. So I have the bike racks on hand. They were purchased with, I believe, 2023 reserve funds. It's been very much a public comment, especially with the amount of visitation at Bartles Beach and Wallace, to include bike racks because they don't have them. And I was actually contacted by Cassandra Frazier, who lives in Lake Mills, and she would like to sponsor the installation costs for one of these bike racks at Bartles Beach in memory of her son who passed away, who was an avid biker. So like I said, this is a project I was going to pursue anyways in the off-season with remaining concrete maintenance funds. We currently have a citywide concrete contract. So these would be a 6x8 approximately pad with a permanently installed bike rack into it. And I was going to use the existing 2024 concrete maintenance contract to install them. However, Cassandra Frazier reached out at a fantastic time and she would like to sponsor the installation of one of these. So that would be approximately $2,200 of installation costs, and she would prefer the installation at Bartles Beach. There are two locations actually that I was proposing. I did take a closer look at the map that was provided here off of Ferry Drive. A 6x8 pad off of that sidewalk in that attachment would actually be alarmingly close to one of the trees that's planted there. I looked at a couple other locations on Bartles Beach, and there is actually a fairly open area next to the men's side of the restroom there. My goal here is to not have cross pedestrian traffic and bike traffic, and also not have to have bikers go in front of the noses of parked cars. So there's a couple different areas that I'm thinking of installing this. It's a tight area down at Bartles, but I think perhaps nearer to the bathroom would be one of the lower impact options as well. I actually would not prefer the option in the attachment that I sent you after looking closer at the proximity of that tree. But I'm open to any feedback on the location of it. But like I said, the approximate size is 6x8. There would be a memorial plaque for her son installed on this as well. And like I said, I'll be pursuing this with leftover maintenance funds, but she is pursuing donation for one.
So clarifying question, at the blue box that's on is where you thought maybe at first?
Yes, correct.
And
And,
the
and now I'm
red
actually not in
dash
favor.
lines are what?
They're just marking locations on GIS. They have no significance.
They're not, that's.
Nope,
part
there's
of
no
the
significance
line.
to those lines.
Couldn't tell.
Okay, that's why I do it in color.
So now I'm actually thinking, after looking at it closer, I think the preferred location would be kind of in the area between the men's restroom and the garden bed that's there.
Yeah.
But I'm really open to any alternatives. Basically, I just need your official acceptance of this donation and perhaps a few recommendations on where to put it.
Well, and Vicky, if you're watching or thing, I think that's her garden bed that.
It
That's
is
right.
Vicky's. It is Vicky's,
That's
yes.
right. So,
We've worked on that.
yes, so we want to be careful, but I think that would be a good spot.
Okay.
And even if you had like the thing where you went in and we were surrounded by trees or not trees, these plantings might be a good thing. Help me out, I don't remember, what does this bike rack look like? Is it the circular one? Is it the?
No, so if you go on the ones by Main Street, it's very similar to what those look like. Those metal ones that are several used, they're permanently installed in concrete with footings. It's not just one that sits on the lawn to where
Right,
you have
right.
it. I mean, they're true tamper-proof bike racks. I
That's-
believe they're galvanized, so they're not powder coated or painted or anything, but they would be set in basically like a 6x8 concrete pad. I did look at that location by the garden bed, by Vicky's garden bed, and the location that I was looking would allow enough room to where it didn't crowd the men's restroom, but also didn't impede on the garden bed. I think that's the next best space available for it, is my thought.
But we could maybe check with Vicky. I don't think she'd be adverse to encroaching on her garden bed as long as we just kept the same amount of plants there. But we can ask. But
So
I
you're
do
talking
think
about
that-
in where the garden bed is?
Yes.
Here, I'll show you.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
Because I'm
talking, yes.
thinking
It would
about
be-
the foot traffic.
It would be this area, like right here off of this little corner.
So the only thing I'm thinking about is people who are parking their cars and coming to the beach then have to go around either the flower bed or right next to the bike rack. I'm just thinking of foot traffic. So what about up here by the bushes, like over here?
That would
Like on the back side of the
Between
bathroom.
the
Here's picture. The
and-
back side of the bathroom has some
And
tree
Ferry
bushes.
Drive.
And then there's a spot here, and then you don't have, because he's talking about putting it here, and then you have people walking.
Yep, that's true. Like I said, I'm open to any.
That's just a
most-
suggestion.
Yeah,
you
mostly
thought about.
I sent my first suggestion. I'm like, I actually don't know if I like that. So now I'm kind of soliciting your guys' input on what you guys think would be a good location for it.
For me,
It's fine.
it might be wise for us to go down and look at the location. And then can we make this recommendation at the next meeting, or is that something you want tonight?
Well, we can approve the.
We can
You can
approve the
approve,
donation.
yeah, I was gonna say, you can approve the
donation.
donation.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about this? You can approve the donation. Well,
I
let me
make a
think about
motion that
'cause
we approve the donation, and then we subject the citing to Parks Board and Facilities Director inspection of the park.
I mean, we could designate it between Tim and I as well, I think, maybe. I mean, it's, just go down there and take a look. Basically, I do need approval of this because we do have a kind of finite window for our concrete work in the fall time, and I also require city council approval of this donation. So I mean, what I could do as well is we can approve the donation, and then, we talked about a couple available options for these. Looking at behind the restroom, like Mary suggested, next to the flower bed by the men's restroom. I would like to pull the other previous location by that tree. It's just too comfortably close to that tree. But as long as you make the motion to accept the donation, that's really all I need this evening.
I think that's fine. I'm looking
So
at.
made.
Well, now that I actually think about this, we would accept the donation. We would have a meeting approximately the first week in November. City council would be the third week in September. I would be fine accepting those donation. Therefore, I have city council approval at the end of September, and then we can decide on a formal location at the first meeting in October. I think that might be the best route to do.
And the wording on the memorial, that is on a plaque, or how does that?
Yep.
is it-
So we've standardized the style of plaque that we are now using. That plaque is what you see on the historical buildings downtown. It's that cast bronze plaque as well as the ones that I have around the Veterans Memorial. Trying to make a standard, I don't know, classy-ish plaque. It's the same style plaques that I'm also using for the memorial trees. The language there would be in loving memory of Michael S. Martin, his birth date and death date, and then forever riding free would be in letters as well, and that was at the discretion of his mother, Cassandra Frazier. There would not be a photo attached to it,
Would not.
no.
Okay.
So I think timing-wise, that actually works great. We can have a follow-up discussion on this specific location, the first meeting in October, but then I would have my boxes checked to have this officially recognized at City Council.
So do we have a motion to accept the donation?
I'll make the motion to accept the donation.
Second.
All right, so McCray,
Aye.
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 All right, so motion to accept passes unanimously. So thank you.
Yep, thank you.
And
Thank-
thank,
Cassandra.
yes, Cassandra for the
Sure, for the
very generous, sorry
generous
for her
donation.
loss.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty cool. I was in the process of speaking with Schweiger Concrete to start scheduling this work, and she called me right after I got off the phone with Schweiger Concrete, asking to donate a bike rack when I was unprompted to discuss with her, so I was very excited. She's been a pleasure to deal with.
Thank you. So, thank you for that. Moving to recommendations for future agendas. So the future agenda, we are going to, what I would propose is that we do include any comments. We do have public comments like they did on there about the minutes, the timing. So I think if we have public comments or questions, I think we should add that 2-minute time limit to those. as they did on the Rock Lake agenda?
So if you were to do an agenda layout, you would have your first call to order, roll call. You can do your review of minutes at that time, or you can have your public hearing immediately after calling the meeting to order. My suggestion would be, if you're soliciting public comment for the public hearing, do that immediately after roll call in your first order of business, and then you can follow with your minute approval and then general agenda breakdown.
All agree to that? All right. So any other comments on,
I have a question, not for the next one, but it was kind of embarrassing. I had no idea that the parks facility was across from where all the garden stuff is recycled. So I think in the off-season, I would really like to have a tour with you. of your facilities.
Where is this?
You know, the one where you turn left at the dollar store and go down whatever that street is, and you go right, and you can pick up the mulch, or you can drop off your
Oh, yeah.
stuff. And on the left-hand side there, you guys have your facility, right? I think it would be cool to get a Parks Board tour.
Oh, sure.
But
You guys
not-
can
not
meet
now.
staff
I know you're
too.
busy, but
I was gonna
maybe
say
in
the next thing
November.
too is, I always give an update to staff afterwards, what we talked about at Parks Board. And they're not in attendance. I don't think they want to see any more of me throughout the day. But I would also love for you guys to meet staff at some point too. I am the face of the department, but I am not the department. My staff are the ones who complete the work. So I'd love for you guys to potentially meet staff sometime.
to that idea, Mike, and I don't know how many years ago it was, but we did have a tour. We had a school bus. And we took a tour, and I don't remember if it was our representative or the board, the city council president, but rode along with us. And we went to all the different parks, just so we had an idea where they were and what they look like. I don't know who paid for that school bus, but how do we pursue that if that's what we want to do? I mean, how do we find out costs and?
Find a nice fall day and we all take a bike trip to all the parks. That works for me. I would love to do that though. The nice thing is we can all look at the parks that we currently have, some of the issues that I and my department are facing, what our priorities are, and then just a general tour. And then I would absolutely welcome that idea.
Well,
I know Department of Public Works does it with their facilities. I believe it's something that we can do as well.
so is that something that we could maybe make a date and then try to make either ride, bike, walk to these different places that meet at a certain date?
Sure.
And carpool, take some pictures
Sure.
and just get an idea of what we're looking at, and then we can just, so how are we gonna go about that? What day works best for people? Should we think about, some of you are still working, some of us are not.
I would say let's think for mid-October. I think would prefer for my schedule. I got to get through September yet, but perhaps we could do mid-October when we got some fall colors as well. And then we could discuss a final date at our October meeting. So we could say if our October meeting is the first week in October, we can say, hey, next Tuesday we can all get up or something like that and meet.
So, 'cause our next meeting is October 14th, is it not?
I do believe, oh, never mind.
That's what I have down, Monday the 14th.
Well, what we can do too is we can also just shoot a message to everyone as well and see if there's a day that works at some point, and we can plan with each other's schedule. It'd be fairly low impact. I mean, I would love to take the opportunity to go around and show you some of the things that we're working on.
Should we just all send Eric when we can't go in October, or how do you want to do that?
Sure, that works for me.
Okay. Just contact you directly and just say, here's, and then you can say, all right, this is what works for
Yep,
everybody.
and then what I'll do is I'll send like, hey, here are the 2-3 dates that work best for everybody. You guys go ahead and pick. That works fine for me.
And as long as we do the route and have a kind of a little bit of detail, we can always do, if we can't make that day, we can go ourselves and
Sure.
take a
Sure.
look.
Oh, it's an awesome idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for that. Any other comments? If not, the meeting is adjourned at 7:33.